All right, so hello and welcome to this evening's Zoom webinar that's being produced by the Honors College of West Virginia University. This event is the fifth Honor Diversity lecture taking place this spring semester. I am Damien Clement, Associate Dean of WVU's Honors College. Tonight's lecture is entitled Broadening Accessibility to Higher Education Without Breaking the Bank by Dr. Leslie Cockrell. Dr. Cottrell is the director of WVU Center for Excellence in Disabilities and a professor in the Department of Pediatrics. We will follow standard Zoom webinar format this evening. After the presentation, we'll host an open question and answer session. Since we're using a Zoom webinar platform for this lecture, before we begin, let me review some of the features that will help you experience this evening's lecture in the best way possible. If you're having issues with audio or video at any point during the webinar, be sure to check your personal Zoom settings and your computer's volume controls. If you have questions, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Due to enhanced security protocols, webinar attendees will not be able to see others' questions, only their own. To ask a question, you must click on the Q&A button. A separate screen will appear. Then you may type your question. The presenter will answer all questions live at the end of the presentation. If live captioning has been requested, it can be viewed by clicking the CC button at the bottom of your screen. If live captioning was not requested, a captioned version of this recording will be available at honors.wvu.edu. And now let's get started with this evening's lecture. So it is my pleasure to hand the screen over to Dr. Cockrell. So Leslie, you can take it away.
All right, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you for the invitation to present to this group. I'm really excited to discuss this topic a little bit more. And so this is meant to be an active and involved discussion at any point in time. If you have thoughts, share those in the chat, raise your hand, stop me, and let's discuss. The title of this may seem to be geared toward administrators, but it's actually not. It's and I appreciate you joining if you're not an administrator as well, because it's a way for us as any role that we play, student, staff, faculty, administrator, public, community member, whatever you might be, how we can broaden the accessibility of higher education. Now you can ask why we might want to do that, but it's that involvement and that purpose of higher education and the accessibility for all that we're really getting into that. So how can we do that while making it cost effective? So Dr. Clement already introduced me, so I'm going to skip over that pretty quickly. And just as a brief overview, many of you probably knew this, but just kind of why are we talking about this as well, other than from the disability slant? We know that higher education is changing certain parts of it. That in general, higher education institutions are trying to address budgetary limits, and that's as a larger system as a whole. And sometimes that results in some restrictions in terms of reaching their missions, whether it's service, teaching, research, combination of all three. So sometimes you get caught into the matter. You could easily get caught into what do we restrict, what do we limit, what do we do away with. And so when you talk about disability or support services, sometimes that's lower on the list because the main mission is related to teaching. I'm going to combine it all together. So the common response with rising costs is to increase tuition because other costs of setting up labs, of salaries, of you name it, are also rising. Another response is to limit or remove certain services that either aren't used a lot, or perceived to not be used a lot, or for various reasons aren't up high on the list. So at the same time that all this is happening, we have more people interested in accessing opportunities. So, and with higher education, I'm including community college, I'm including other types of post-secondary training opportunities. So keep that in mind as well. So more people, either from a workforce directed movement or an interest of their own, are asking for these opportunities. while budgets are being decreased. So how do we wed the two? So as costs have increased, the other thing that we've noticed is that there's larger gaps in terms of equity for particularly marginalized students. And I've listed some of those here. So you have first in their families or first generation students to attend college. Other underrepresented populations, so race, ethnicity, English as a second language, low income, in some aspects, very rural, underserved areas, students from those areas. Those students are often the ones who cannot access these opportunities because of the rising costs. So today, I'm going to talk about one particular piece of that group, which are students who might fit these categories as well, but have at least one reported disability. Okay, I'm also going to filter in there or mix in there faculty and staff and administrators who might have disabilities, and they're part of that community. Okay, so they might be wanting to access facilities, resources at a higher education, and they're having difficulty. Okay, so if we reimagine an undergraduate, graduates also included, but particularly undergraduate, an affordable, that it's focused on skills that learners need to go into the workforce, and that it is accessible for learners across the scale of all backgrounds, that would be the wish list, right? That would be our fullest mission to hit as many people who would like to take that opportunity. So there have been potential solutions thrown out, and I'm going to mix that in as well. You can see on the side pilot models and what they've done. So particularly in liberal arts, smaller than West Virginia University, smaller areas has been the pilot settings, but we've also had peer institutions and even universities larger than WVU who have tried these. And so it might be more structured course pathways from start to degree seeking that limits the amount of time and costs accordingly. Smaller class sizes so that you get that connectivity, you get that slightly different learning style of active learning environments like the honors college often provides. One-on-one guidance from a success coach. And I would say that these pilot models are, they differ. So it's not just for students with disabilities. It could be, if it's a smaller class size, it could be all students. So it just depends. Wraparound supports that exist for a student based on what comes up at the time. It could be connected to engaging in academic activities or the transition between other living environments, other things that are happening in your life at the time you're in college that you might need additional support. And one of those would be career development and placement support. So finishing that transition after higher education or post-secondary training and placement. On the right, you have additional sources. So whether it was done in these pilot models or things that have been proposed and yet to be implemented, people have included maximizing facility utilization, so space, using our space wisely, which has been implemented here. You might have heard kind of our schedules for spaces for classrooms and other types of space here at WVU. A teaching focused faculty. We have teaching assistant professors, associate professors on staff here as well. Focused course offerings, affordable electronic textbooks. So trying to reduce those costs across the board in different ways, and a focused student experience. So some you might have seen here implemented in a couple of different places already. Okay, so let's start to focus on the disability perspective of this. So I like to include this slide in many of my presentations because I'm a visual learner, and this visually helps me understand the difference between equality, equity, and justice. And then we're going to apply this to the higher education opportunities. So on the left, equality, everyone's there, everyone's at the gate. However, some aren't able to see, some aren't able to get access to even a certain point. Okay, that's equality. Equity is we provide some accommodation. So the person on the far right in the yellow shorts might have an additional box, which is their accommodation, so that they can see the same view as the other two. And then justice, well, you remove the wall entirely, and so everyone can see through. They don't need that accommodation, but they can see from their standpoint. The last two are possible, and the last two we're going to talk about. Justice pieces have been thought of as the most costly piece, but we've also had some perceptions where even equity, adding that extra box, is costly, but also not equal. And we're going to get into that person on the right, by having two boxes, gets more than the person on the left. Okay, so mind shifts there a little bit. So how can we get equity and even justice in higher education for students with disabilities? All right, so what do we talk about with disabilities? Physical or mental condition that limits, I'm going to put in quotes, a person's movements, senses, or activities. Doesn't mean that they cannot complete a task, but there is a measurable limitation somewhere based on a measurement. A person who has, these are all different, so that's Google. From ADA Network, they modify that. So a person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activity, and that could be my perception, but also a measured interruption. And then the third, any condition of the body or mind that makes it more difficult for the person with the condition to do certain activities and interact with the world around them. So I include this slide to set the tone, but I'll also say we all come to the table with very different definitions of what a disability is. Okay, we tend to take the medical model, which is there's a limitation. There's a social model we're going to grab in there here in a few minutes. But you can also tell, depending on your definition, we're talking about potentially a lot of students who would fit this definition, who are interested in going to college or post-secondary training of some type, who may or may not be getting that opportunity or perceiving that opportunity is there. Some examples of disabilities. You can have disabilities that are present at birth, and here's some examples. Duchenne muscular dystrophy, Down syndrome. You could have some things that have developed over time from development. So being on a person with autism spectrum disorder or a person with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder would fit that. You could have a disability related to an injury, so traumatic brain injury, spinal cord injury, a long-standing condition such as diabetes, something that's progressive, muscular dystrophy or muscular sclerosis. You can also incorporate acute disabilities, a broken leg, as an example here, where someone has needed services that we're going to talk about for a certain period of time. So how many potential students are we talking about? And we're going to get at that. But in general, the larger population, we have about 1 in 4 adults. So this is adults in terms of who would be approaching college or post-secondary education, have one of these types of disabilities. And I've broken down the type of disability and the proportion of our population on the left. This is in West Virginia on the left. About a third of West Virginia adults have at least one disability reported. We know this is underreported. 1 in 4 women report at least one disability. 2 in 5 non-Hispanic American Indians, Alaska Natives have at least one disability. So it's a substantial portion of our communities that we need to consider. So when we start talking about disability in higher education, we're not new to the scene. This has been reviewed. There are policies even, and we know it takes some time for policies to be developed. And so this has been around at least as early as the 1970s, where we've had guidelines for how to move toward that equity, move toward that justice piece within higher education and post-secondary. So these are just listed, and I encourage, if you're interested in policy, to seek these, type these in. All of these relate to receiving education, post-secondary training with a disability, how to provide it. Some of these have been added across over time to really clarify language, to provide guidance on how to implement these policies. So definitely I wanted to list those. There's research-based policies, there's teaching-based policies, many more than what I've listed here, but these are the main ones. Okay, so that was the general population in terms of who has a disability, at least one disability. For higher education, the largest survey told us about 19% of our undergraduate students report at least one disability, 12% of our graduate students. This highly varies based on the degree. We're going to talk about that a little bit. Those students in this survey identify a couple of main barriers. One's programmatic or structure documentation. We're going to talk about that. And then you cannot ignore the social or the perception, the feeling of inclusion, of acceptance. You can have access, physical access. It could be in a policy. Do you feel that you have access? And that's really important to assess both. Okay, so the way I've presented this or organized this presentation from this point are in 4 different areas. And these 4 areas really relate to the more common barriers for students, and now I'm also going to throw in faculty and staff who also filled out this survey, mention, because we have to know the potential barriers to know where to intervene, right? And then how to intervene based on our role and our resources. So transitioning from high school to college, that beginning pipeline, there are things where the barriers start to pop up and the perceptions of inclusion start to pop up. Disability services once I'm here at the institution. Accommodations in general from that whole time. And then this idea of universal design strategies. One's more immediate, one's more preventative and long-term. We're going to talk about the 2 approaches. And then technology and how not to use it as a potential quick solution and then get into some trouble. So accommodations, when I mention accommodations of learners, so it's largely based on functional abilities and needs. We can have one accommodation, such as a note taker, and we can apply that accommodation to 15 people. The impact of that note taker is going to be very different for all 15 people because where are they coming at? What is their functioning to date, right? It all might be I need someone to take the notes to the volume of the presentation, comes too quickly. Then from there, I can use those notes. But the effectiveness is going to depend on that individual. So there's unique characteristics that we must factor into this. The reason, I'll tell you why I'm saying this here in a minute. So the same accommodation, it may differ for 2 or more individuals, and not all accommodations must be provided or supported by an institution. So it's not everything needs to be provided to me, okay? And it's not a canned accommodation is all we can provide. It's somewhere in the middle. So in terms of transitioning from high school to college, we know that even outside of the situation for students with disabilities, documentation between K-12 pipeline and higher ed can break down, right? And when something isn't shared, like 2 electronic medical record systems, when something isn't shared, the person has to fill it out again, okay? So when you're applying, you might say, okay, you state you have a disability. We need proof of that disability to get that started. A student who has already gone through psychometric testing from K through 12 at some point may have to do that again in their admissions or application for post-secondary training. That's duplication, right? So that's a potential opportunity there. Documentation concerns across higher education institutions. Some might say we must have this assessment. We must have this documentation. And as a student gets a packet together, right, they have to navigate what's going to work, what's not going to work. If something's missing, they have to pay for or access additional services to get that documentation that they need. So if you're applying to 15 different schools, you could potentially have 15 different applications solely based on the proof of your disability. Okay. Overall, here's where a policy comes in. So an ADA Amendments Act 2008 said basically you can't require too much documentation. So many times there's a limit to that, but navigating that as a potential student applicant can still be problematic. There are ways that we can make that a little bit more efficient. Okay. Responsibility for seeking services and accessibility. Through K through 12, there was a lot of support available, counselors, advocates, IEP group to set that tone, what support services would be needed. The student was involved. For college, for post-secondary, there's no IEP group. There's very little advocacy group. The student, potential student, family must navigate that now, solely or with a smaller group. And it's not guaranteed that students post-graduation have those self-advocacy skills they need to navigate that system. Okay. And then the fact that, so there's a benefit of intentional transitional programming. Do you want to get post-secondary training? What would you want that to look like? We know that happens. We know that happens even as early as 9th grade when you get into tracks of training. But when you're talking about these types of transition, it should be at least 6 months or far earlier than that when you're talking about the transitional systems you need for support services going into post-secondary. That rarely happens. Okay. Things like peer-to-peer mentoring, academic coaching. It's on the rise, right? We're getting there, but those things have been shown to help dramatically a student who is now navigating a system on their own. Many students with disabilities do not perceive themselves as having a disability to the point of needing accommodation, so they don't ask for them. Or they've learned it doesn't help to ask for them because you may not get them, right? So to assess that and to work on those skills is really important. Okay, so as a peer, you could encourage someone. You could potentially model that behavior. As a staff and faculty member, you can talk about that process. You can learn about that process. And as a support services staff, you can get that information out, even during the application. Because sometimes, and I'll tell you a story, sometimes institutions say, oh, you don't want to come here because you have a disability. All right, either because of the physical terrain or what have you. What kind of a message is that in this pipeline? Okay, you need to know what type of environment, inclusive environment supports are there. Would I want to come there? So outreach, expand our consideration of who would want to come here. Why would they want to come here and what do they need? Expand that. Then we have established K-12 pipelines, but do we have the pipelines that we're talking in this case for individuals with disabilities? Self-advocacy programming, giving them the skills to navigate. How do you apply to our institution? What things, here's what you'll need. Let us know if you need help with that. From documentation across higher ed, making that consistent as much as possible. And the admissions approach, I've heard some institutions, they're not even accessible. If you need a screen reader, you can't read the application. Shuts down right there. You're done. Okay. That's hopefully going out of the way and fewer institutions are here, but I do still hear that. Once the student's here, student service seeking behavior, encouraging appropriate seeking behavior. responses. Who do I need to talk to for this? Expanding programming. Now, during budget issues, right? We're going to talk about how to do that. Really more quality than quantity. Peer-to-peer mentoring, academic coaching, these are things peers can do as well. That support group is in there. Cross-programming, understanding of accommodation. So I'll say this, across our programs within the university, and this is not when I'm saying ours within, it's not just a WVU. Usually units have different accommodations, different processes. So when you declare a major, it might be different if you're transitioning from major to major, or you're going from undeclared to a major. It might be a very different process. Or an advisor, a faculty member knows more, knows less about that process. Let me see. I'm trying to go into questions.
Yeah, I was just about to tell you there's a question in here. Let me read it to you if that would help. What is the marginal benefit of training a highly specialized individual like an undergraduate or graduate student?
I think there's a baseline that we as higher education institutions have yet to meet. So if you're talking about peer education on the awareness side, huge benefits that we really don't meet, and it wouldn't take much. Things like this, get together and connections and discussions like this get us to that baseline. So this is phenomenal. If you're talking about above and beyond that, there's a little bit of cost. Many times people, and we're going to talk about assistive technology means of training, about $300 for a huge amount. If you think number of students, there have been in the pilot models, there's been a small sample, and by small sample, 150 students who were identified as navigators, peer navigators, and increased enrollment of individuals who completed a 2 and a 4 year in both models. Those rates increased by 5%, but by identifying 150 students who acted as peer navigators. So I would say a significant amount that student roles play. Did that answer your question? Let me know if it did. Okay, thanks, Lucas. Okay. So academic coaching, all of that, the peer model is very significant. The staff, the faculty advising model, the advising model, we have a couple of different pathways in terms of advising. That's great. But remember, peer, I'm gonna throw in peer models for staff and faculty as well, right? So you have staff and faculty who are also trying to access accommodations through the human resources route. We want our human resources to share the same message. You can come here and you can work at this institution, right? And that's a model for accommodations, a model for an individual with disability here and striving. So don't forget that piece too. So we talked about community colleges briefly. They're very important to us as models, and for these reasons. So in terms of post-secondary training, they have higher proportions of individuals with disabilities attending their programming than the 4-year colleges, and for many reasons. So you can see 60% of individuals with disabilities who attend college are there, right? So greater percentages go. Now, why? There are formal disability support services. They might have a little bit more. Faculty are smaller, so you can isolate and isolate and really hit with your training populations of faculty and staff who then can provide services to your students. And then the students often really like community colleges because of the last few. Living at home, so that transition into the dorm life, into apartment life, the process of open enrollment, the variability of college credit, there's more flexibility, or there has been in the past, more flexibility in community colleges that students with disabilities like than in the four-year colleges. We're seeing a shift. Four-year colleges are bringing those into the fold. So you can keep tuition the same cost, you can increase the tuition cost, but the flexibility is still there, the quality, okay? And so just to continue the community college in terms of types of disability, this was just a nice visual from one survey, older survey, but this is the most recent that I could find. So 2015 to 2016, a quarter of the 7.2 million students enrolled at community colleges reported a disability. Okay. About 20% of students at those colleges identified as having one or more, and particularly ADD, ADHD were the most common. All right, so that's the pipeline, right? Those are the things that we need to consider. So what do community colleges, what's that? How do we implement the flexibility of community colleges? And not just in our academic, in our classrooms, but in our living, right? Dorm living, community living. There's opportunities there that our current disability services, which we're about to talk about, really haven't focused on. They focus on the classroom accommodations. There are a lot of accommodations that can make students feel included and faculty and staff feel included. All right, so in the past, and this is, again, I'm not talking about WVU disability services. I'm talking about larger higher ed disability services at a national level. This is from literature across the board. So in typical, knowing that, disability service offices tend to focus on the legal and ethical pieces of accommodation. All of those policy pieces that I mentioned, they're looking to make sure, are we addressing what we're supposed to address, okay, as a higher education institution? So protection from discrimination by providing accommodations, resources across campus, and I've already mentioned that sometimes that varies across units. They connect with a specialist, usually the process, and I believe that's, someone please share any experiences that you've had if you're willing to share them, but usually you connect to a specialist that's in a disability service office, you obtain some type of documentation, and that goes back to your faculty member saying, I need an accommodation in this particular class. Sometimes it's across several classes or all your classes, but that tends to be the process. How someone gets to the disability office varies. And so here's a breakdown. So look at the highest, okay? If you're a student, your recommendations to a student with a disability are generally the most common way people get to the disability services office. 50% of students get there from a peer recommendation. 18% from a counseling service. Not student health, that's 9%. That's the bottom. But counseling, so maybe stress, anxiety, mental health of some sort. Faculty members are 12%. So you go to the class, I might need an accommodation, you need to go to the disability services office, okay? But if that's varied, all of these different places, we need to be uniform and consistent, but student recommendations are the highest. I wanted to highlight that. Okay, so what's the national recommendation? Let me see, hold on. Where do you get your data from? Lucas, I'm gonna share, I have a reference list at the end. You're welcome to use that, and then I have them all hard copy, and I can send you links. Awesome. Okay, so disability services, what they recommend, where do we move forward? That's costly, okay, or that's been cost effective. So making it consistent across programs and across campuses, having some type of training and review regularly. Here's how you do it. If you need an accommodation, here's what an accommodation might be. Here's who you go to talk about it. Here are the options for you to consider. And if you need something that's outside of the list, maybe talk to this person, okay? Something that's available. A quick YouTube, TikTok, go Go to it real quick and you've got it. Move beyond that compliance step. Don't just check the box. Not that that's not important. It's very important to make sure that we are implementing ADA. But that inclusive piece, how do we really make that inclusive environment stick? Okay. We're going to talk about universal design. That can be costly, but doesn't have to be moving forward. We don't have to limit on what we spend. Okay, sometimes we say we're not going to do that because another provider is going to provide that. So Department of Rehabilitation Services, or DRS, might pay for that. So our office is not going to pay for it. We're not going to have them available. That restricts the range, the breadth. Get input from students, know what accommodations, how they're changing, what services might be needing. Increase collaborations across campuses. One unit may have more resources than another unit. How can we connect as a community and share resources? And then reviewing and or updating policies to reflect the social model. So not this medical model, which we tend to, it's easy. It's that documentation. You've got to show me proof. But this social model, right, of equity, inclusive, this disruption, you perceive this disruption, which we're seeing the social model and the medical model clash now, right? So incorporating that a little bit more. So I bring back this visual. Okay, so disability services is right there. It's the hub of getting us equity and getting us justice. Now, I'm not going to put all the responsibility on them. And many times it is placed on that office solely. Okay, but as a community, if we think about it, the accommodations and the availability that we provide, perhaps someone doesn't have to go to disability services to get it, right? It's there. It's already there. So discounts available for health, housing, literature, materials, technology, travel, knowing what resources are there for students with disabilities as a whole. Do you know what the Division of Rehabilitation Services are? Do you know that if someone's going to a 4-year, well, any post-secondary training, that's considered important training toward being an involved member of the workforce, future workforce. So they're going to pay you for certain things, for that training. What is that? How do the pieces come together? What are the pieces? All of us need to know a little bit more, and that's the awareness baseline. Okay, so just in general, in terms of that part, the disability services, so share processes for services for the potential students. Again, we have a disability services office. We have these types of accommodations. Here's our process. If you're thinking about, and I'm going to use WVU as an example, if you're thinking about coming to WVU, here it is. Here's all you need to get ready. Call us if you have any questions, right? We want you to hear. Flexibility is not siloed into one unit versus another. There's units that do this wonderfully in their recruitment. They've got it down pat. And it's not just targeting students with disabilities. That universal design is anyone who might be interested in their programming feels that it's for them. Those barriers are not there, either in the way they phrase it, what's included, how they've covered it. Anyone can access it. And that's how you cut down costs. You're not targeting particular groups. You don't have a brochure for students with disabilities and students with this and students with this. You have one brochure that has universal language. Once students are enrolled, consistent assessment, consistent process, and everyone knows what it is. Consistent message. Workshops, peer student, the student workshops, the faculty and staff workshops. Implement an app. Many people have had an app. Again, that quick videos on how to. And then dispute resolution, really quick resolutions. And then to keep them here, create budget for accommodations. Okay. And real quick, not real quick, but there's 2 more sections. So accommodations versus universal design. So these are 2 approaches. Typically, and I think I have, yeah. Typically, we've done individual accommodations. That's the most costly, but it's quick, it's short term. So many institutions do this. So reasonable accommodations that are covered by ADA that the institution needs to provide. So these are some of those that you see: specialized tutoring, audiobooks. They tend to be prescribed and then applied to students as they need to. Several barriers for that. Some are not evidence-based. Faculty don't tend to know all the accommodations and when they're applied. So they get it, and then what happens is note-taking. Well, my class, how does this apply in my class and how I've structured my class? So you have a disconnect, okay? So you have ambivalent attitudes about accommodations, and then this whole ethical thing, that equity, the fact that we're giving one person an extra box to look over is seen as unethical. That means I'm giving this student extra than all my other students, and they're going to know that it's different. When in reality, that's so that the person can understand your class. You get them up to speed with everyone else. So it's a very different mindset. And how do we get to that level? So many times we're in the left side, the individual accommodations, but we need to be in the right side. And as we start from today moving forward, if we think universal design, for instance, if we've used accessible Word documents to put our syllabi, so that if you're using a screen reader, you can read my syllabus, right? And it's on a website that everyone can access. I don't have to worry about modifying my syllabus or my textbook to someone who needs it in a different format after my class has started. That's stressful to me. But if I've thought ahead, that's universal design. I don't have to worry about it. It cuts down costs. I have one resource that I have to work with. Okay. So in general, once it's implemented, many people like universal design. Many people think, though, that it's costly, and it's really not. It's a couple steps ahead. Okay. So when we have universal design, we let people know, we let potential students know. We let them know during our tours. We incorporate those pieces in shadowing opportunities so they can see that our lab experiences also factor in someone that might be needing to use a chair. Our presentations are accessible from the beginning. We don't have to say, let me know if you need them upon request. No, they're accessible. Enrollment, lectures are the same way. Faculty and staff instructions are available to anyone. We see more closed captioning available, right, all the time. And really, COVID brought that on more, but students with disabilities were there years before that. And learning environments for advanced training, again, field experience. Okay. The last area was landscape of technology. So more and more online teaching, and COVID again brought about this. So we loved it. We love the benefits of technology. Zoom is fantastic. Well, sometimes it's great. So, but a little over 8% of faculty and staff report receiving training and accommodations for students. So while we shifted to online, the training to provide quality online had to catch up. Okay. In terms of accessibility of online, of technology, you see 66% of faculty and staff reporting having no knowledge of how to provide disability-related accommodations. So you get this letter that accommodation is needed, but not consistent training on how to implement. Okay. Websites, you would think with ADA that even the home pages are accessible, which means this, again, I use this often, a screen reader, someone who's using a screen reader, low or limited vision, can read your main website. Look at the bottom, 97% of colleges who failed ADA compliance, and that continues to happen, failed at their home page. Not even when you get into the units, but main page. It's not accessible. Certain pop-ups are there, or the side menu can't be read, so I can't even navigate what the majors are. Okay. And usually websites aren't changed until a lawsuit occurs. And so what happens is you have more lawsuits. Okay. I'm going to say assistive technology because this is a very cost-effective way of changing these 4 areas. So there's low tech, mid tech, high tech. On the right, you see some examples of this. Assistive technology is a device of some sort that allows someone to do what they want to do in very basic terms. So if I want to talk and I'm not able to, I don't have speech, then low tech might be I have a communication board and I'm tapping out my sentences. To high tech, I'm using a speech, a voice recognition, a magnifier. Okay. Computer access. There's assistive technology for anything, recreation, occupation. You can see vision, right? A wheelchair is a form of assistive technology. So knowing what AT is, knowing some examples, knowing where you can get AT. So I'm going into an apartment and the kitchen, I have to do this. I'm using a chair and I have to do this to use my stove. Well, no worries. The state AT program is here related to WVU. WVU has the state AT program. Let's go into your kitchen and let's assess. What can we modify with your landlord's involvement? And you can loan it out for the course of the time you're in college. Okay, you can loan these out. You can use these for free. Okay, so knowing those things, and West Virginia is not the only one. There's state programs in every state. Knowing what they are and where to go is important. Okay. Now, just briefly, with the last bit of time I have, I wanted to talk about in terms of the retention. We see a big shift in terms of the percentage of individuals who go into STEM fields. So we've talked about undergraduate, we've talked about that first getting them here, enrolling them, and then when we want to keep them and get them to where they want to go, and they want to go into the STEM fields, we see a drop. So what things that we've talked about, what can we do, and let's apply it here. In those groups that I mentioned have great disparities in terms of access of higher education, also have access issues for the STEM fields, perhaps for similar reasons, okay? So 10% of the national workforce has a disability, 2% of the STEM professionals have a disability. We lose them, okay? Many times that's due to once you get to the 3rd and 4th year and you're doing labs, you're going out into field work. Those labs are not, they're not adjusted to someone with a disability, particular disabilities. And many times people say, well, if I need to develop an accommodation in my lab, that is huge expenses. Not always, all right? When we're developing new lab space, let's think universal design, okay? But for the lab space we have, yes, to totally strip it and put in some accommodations would be a lot, but there's ways that we can do. And so the next couple of slides are going to be those things that we could help implement, okay? And get people in, not lose them in field classes and in those applied levels for the STEM fields. So you see, for individuals who are blind or have vision impairment, the lab and the fieldwork accommodations, that's where we have the breakdown, but we also start to have the breakdown in the classroom presentations. So on the right, you see some of the tools, multi-sensory tools, not just slides, multi-sensory. And there's all kinds of cheap ways to present math, science, using multi-sensory tools. That's a whole presentation in and of itself. Computer-based models with voice synthesizers, cheap. Nowadays, all technology that we carry have those pieces. That AT, this is a form of AT that we walk around with, okay? We can incorporate that into our training. Assignments can be done with this. Similar, you're gonna see some patterns here. Individuals who are deaf or have hard of hearing, again, classroom presentation, lab and fieldwork accommodations, what type? Math is the breakdown for individuals, often the more common breakdown for individuals with disabilities. Many times, institutions have started to incorporate pictorial approaches. So again, these other training, teaching concepts, problem-solving programs, even origami, which is interesting. I love, that was an interesting model that was very effective. Okay. In general, for mobility, do we have wide aisles in our classrooms? The labs do have wide aisles. Where do we put the seats? Where do we put the benches? They tend to be appropriate width apart. They're high. Open back desks, workspace options. Sometimes we check the box. There's a large table. It's always in the front. It's always up against the door, right? So that inclusivity part, can it be moved? Can it be modified? That kind of thing. So here's fume hood decks for labs, conform to same height or knee. They can be adjustable. These are about, a median accommodation is $300 for anything listed on this slide. 49.4% of accommodations in the lab math fields cost nothing, right? So it's definitely against the perception, the myth. It's a myth, okay? 43% of students experienced a one-time cost that lasted them through the whole college experience. So if there was, and again, the median tended to be 300. Accommodations for parking. I've heard simple things like the parking. I can't park close to the building, but I can park 2 steps back. There are 2 types of handicap parking on the university premise. The disability plus permit gives you the close to the building, but you got to be special to be the plus. Like this, students talk about these things. Faculty and staff talk about these things. Why is it so complicated, right? It's a slot. It's a place to park. Really looking at the universal design. Again, planning things out. So you have the case-by-case accommodation, which we can't get away from, right? And that's fine. But if we start using the universal design idea, if I as a faculty member know my class is going to be in this classroom, I'm going to go to it early. I'm going to go to it ahead of time and move things around if I can, right? Or I'm going to ask through Lab 25 for a different space, right? And I'm going to reach out to my students if I know ahead of time what are their needs. So we're close. I don't want to, I can share my slides. We go to different types of disabilities and really within the STEM fields and ways that we can not only enroll students, but keep them and again, have them go to where they want to go. I'm trying to think if visual learning STEM, all kinds of models, and again, involves training and not really cost training, okay? And then lastly, faculty and staff. 1 to 4% of faculty and staff have 1 or more disabilities. You can see 26% report job discrimination, 20% report harassment because of their disability. You have additive impacts from gender, employment status, whether they're a faculty or staff member, their disability status, things of that sort. So sometimes they won't report it, sometimes they won't stay here, and they're models. So our role, this is the first step, right? Know that it's there, become aware of disabilities and what you can do, what's available to us, whether you see it on campus or not, where to go. Work on peer advocacy and self-advocacy to provide support. Do you feel comfortable doing that? Sometimes no action is worse, right? People, I'm not going to get in the business. I might say something stupid. It's not the way to do it. Try it, do it. Someone with a disability actually prefers you to at least try to do that. Promote healthy living. Again, there's more than just in-class living that we're talking about, being part of the campus community. Monitor health data, doing some more research, which is going on. We have a universal design team in the ag, now going to the Creative Arts Center, that design group, Dr. Haddix. They look completely at our university and how we can modify it. They're there, they're here. Students are working on it. and improve access. Last, I'll put a plug. There's some badges available to increase the awareness, to share. There's a student series badge. This is the faculty and staff badge. If you go to this link, you can get access to both. This then goes, it's a micro-credential that goes onto your resume and LinkedIn so that employers know that you took it. And then here's some of the, here's the references. And again, happy to provide these documents if there's one you really want to dig into. Okay, sorry, went a little long, but let me, who has questions, comments, please share your experiences. Would love to hear it.
All right, we got a few minutes. Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Cottrell? We can put them in the chat. We can answer them as they come in. Wonderful talk, Leslie. I was really informed. I mean, I knew some of the stuff, but you know, hearing it from you and you were able to contextualize it and help me get a better understanding of some of these issues.
Well,
so thank you.
This is an important series. Glad you're doing it. Appreciate the time.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm not seeing very many questions. Oh, there's one there. Oh, will the slides be shared? Yes.
Happy to send.
Just send me an email and we can, because I think I have a copy of them already, I can happily share that. So yes. Well, doesn't look like we're getting much, which is fine. Sometimes the information just needs to be marinated a little bit, and then you know, questions typically sometimes come afterwards.
Absolutely. And I could put, I don't think, let me put my
Email?
yes. And as it percolates, if people have any questions, want to know what's some of those services and connections here at WVU, happy to do that.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm not seeing any, so I think we'll go ahead. So Leslie, thank you very much for visiting with us this evening. Attendees, if you have any questions, Dr. Cottrell put her email address in the chat there. An archived version of this webinar will be available later on the Honors College website. So Leslie, thank you very much again for your very excellent presentation, and everyone have a good evening.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Bye-bye.